Hi, and welcome everyone. And thank you for joining us today on this cozy Sunday. We really appreciate everyone who comes out to spend some time. This is a free meeting for all Pilates and movement enthusiasts, geeks, and fans. It's sponsored by Pilatesology in partnership with Perspire, Providence Pilates Center, and Authentic Method Pilates. And fun, news, Authentic Method Pilates is hosting Anelia Garcia on April 8th through 10th for a weekend of intensive Pilates training, and it's open to teachers from all certifications. Anelia Garcia runs the leading Pilates franchise in South America, and she studied under Romana Krzyzanowska for many years. And this is her first time in New York City. She's a powerhouse presenter that always leaves you super inspired. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to Vivian, who isn't here right now, but will be joining a little later. And you can also DM her on Instagram at Authentic Method Pilates. Our book club is now bi-monthly. So our next book in May is by Javier Perez Pont and Esperanza Aparicio Romero. And we're doing the biography of Joseph Pilates. It's a very, very long book. So we're obviously not doing the whole book. We're going to pick some fun select chapters where we will discuss with Javier, who will be joining us for the meeting that day. So we're so excited to host him in May. You probably already know about Pilatesology, but for those who are not subscribers, it's an amazing resource for students and teachers where you can get unlimited streaming of classical Pilates for only $20 a month. If you have not already, I would highly recommend checking out their vast library of Pilates resources. I am the founder of Perspire, which is an iOS app for Pilates teachers to help independent Pilates studios create amazing experiences for their clients and help them thrive in the ever-changing wellness market. It's free to download and use. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ping me at Perspire app on Instagram, or just reach out here in the chat. Or you can go to perspire.app. Online. Our moderator today is Cheryl, who's right there waving. Cheryl is a Power Pilates master teacher trainer and has studied Pilates since 1999. She's the proud owner of the Providence Pilates Center in Providence, Rhode Island, which opened its doors in 2001. Cheryl had a stroke of genius and started the Pilates Book Club as a way to connect with her clients during the pandemic, and now we're all working on it together here. So thank you so much for
Thanks,
starting
Nabi.
this, Cheryl. And you can take it away with some housekeeping.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Nabi. I think because it's such a small group, there's really no need to have to go on to mute. But if you feel that you want to do that, that's fine. You do not have to. Also, you can chat in the type into the chat area if you want to do something while a discussion is going on and kind of get a topic coming up. But there's also a raise your hand icon. Or to be honest, since we can see everybody, if you just kind of give me a wave, one of us will catch you and we can call on you next if you want to share. I'd really like to make this interactive. In the past couple of book clubs, we have had the author here with us, but we are not able to have the author here for this particular book. So this is a book club for discussion amongst ourselves. So if the more interactive we can make that, I feel the better. I appreciate you guys all taking the time to sit with us on a Sunday. Part of the, when we were choosing books, Elisa, Nabi, Vivian, and I really thought, we've had biography of Joe and a book about Romana, and there are other topics related to Pilates that don't have to be choreography or movement or bibliography or based, you know what I mean? So we were looking for other health topics. We did a book about the Great Walk, the Long Walk, and we did have that author in. And another topic that was really, we did the book about breath with James Nestor, which was fascinating to me because, obviously we breathe, most of us, I don't think a lot about it. And there's all kinds of techniques for breathing and health benefits and, not for certain kinds of breathing. So that was a really, really informative and interesting book. And sleep is something, again, that I think we all take for granted or maybe don't think about as much until we're absolutely exhausted and we realize then it's catching up with us or something like that. And I kind of had to chuckle at the very beginning of the book when he said, some of you might have been raised by you can sleep when you're dead. And I heard that so much growing up. My great granny lived to be 96 years old. And I was like 15 when she passed away. And one of her big tenets was, I got plenty of time to sleep when we're dead, plenty of time to sleep when we're dead. And I grew up hearing that all the time. And I realized that my own sleep habits are actually pretty poor after reading this book. So I'd love to hear if any of you have any topics of interest in particular. You can chat or raise your hand that you'd like to speak about. The book is divided into 3 sections, basically the what is sleep, and then he calls it the good, the bad, and the deathly of sleep, which is pretty morbid. And then the section about dreams and how dreaming and dream sleep is almost like a therapeutic process for us through the evening. So, we can certainly go through the pockets or the buckets of topics like that. But if anybody at all has something that they want to share, I would love to hear that. Elisa, I know, go ahead. You had picked this book too, and I was curious to hear what your thoughts were about it.
I've read several books on sleep, and I had several things come up for me in reading this one. I used to work in publishing before I became a Pilates teacher. I was a publicist at several major publishing houses, including Simon & Schuster and Viking Penguin. And so I kind of know all the background. And one of the things that came up for me in reading this one is I tend to look at all the bad reviews when I look at a book because I want to know everything about it, not just the good reviews. And this one had quite a few critics saying that the research that he was backing up his claims was not reliable. And that's a very common claim when it comes to books like this. And that topic brought up several things for me as a former publishing person. One was, often an author of a book like this will come, and we can talk more about this in a few minutes, but one was, often authors of books like this are under a lot of stress to create enough pages on something that they wrote a paper about, or that they gave a talk about, or a study that they did. And then someone comes along and is like, you should get a publishing deal for that. They get a publishing deal, and then they have to blow up their topic. So they kind of will tend to back it up with stuff like that. So that was one thing that was coming up for me. Like, are these claims against him solid or not? And is this something we should think about when we're reading a book like this? Because it is very much
great thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they have to go on these tours and people attack them or not. And like, is it fair? Is it not fair? So that was one thing that came up for me. Another thing that came up for me was I spent the last couple of years trying out different wearables. Like, I was worried about my sleep. I could see Dawn is nodding too. And so I tried out one of those Oura rings. And then after that, I did a watch thing that was supposedly tracking your sleep. And I have varying feelings about it. In the end, I stopped wearing both of them because I started feeling like a total crazy person for looking at it all the time. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about how you felt if you've done that as well. Does it help you? Does it drive you crazy? Do you feel like it's good information? Those are my first thoughts, but then I have more. Go ahead.
Dawn, would you like to share?
Yeah. About both of the things you said, I think those are really interesting points. I kind of fall in the camp of, there are studies that can prove whatever you want them to prove. And I'm sure there are studies that disprove some of the things that Matthew Walker is saying. But one of the things that really struck me, and before I read the book, I heard him do a very long podcast interview with Sam Harris's Making Sense podcast, which I highly recommend. Because I think Sam tries to be non-judgmental about things, and chooses good guests.
Yeah,
that's my plug for him. But so I heard Matthew Walker speak about all of this, and then read the book. And one of the things that he mentions in the podcast and in the book is that a lot of this research is cutting edge, and that most neuroscientists had no interest in sleep. And so his sleep study and his own research is really a front runner for all of this, because most scientists just didn't care enough to research it. So I think maybe that may be biasing some of the studies, because his stuff is really relatively new in the field of neuroscience. I also think it's really cool that he's coming at it as a neuroscientist. So he's interested in the brain and sleep, which I found really interesting. So that's one. So I didn't necessarily distrust the studies, but I think, sure, there's always going to be other stuff out there that proves the opposite. And then the other thing about wearables is I don't know that he mentions it in the book, but he did in the podcast, that he was a big fan of the Oura Ring because he thought, even though it's not perfect, it was one of the more reliable wearables out there. And then full disclosure, he is now a consultant for them. But he said in the podcast, and whether you believe it or not, I kind of said that he was a trustworthy guy, that the reason he started becoming a consultant for them is because he believed in the product and he thought it was one of the more accurate ones out there, and then wanted to help make it better. So my understanding is that the more recent ones are better. I got an older one. I had a client actually who bought the new one, and she said, "Oh, do you want my old one?" Because we were talking about the sleep book. And I started wearing it. And like you, Elisa, I felt like it was making me, you didn't use the word obsessive, but I will. I was getting a little too obsessive about it. I thought it was interesting. I definitely could see that when I got more sleep, I was better and I felt better. It wasn't just, confirmation bias of, oh, I feel better. And, oh, look, the app says that I do, or vice versa. I thought it was just interesting. But then after a while, I just felt myself getting a little too obsessed with it and I stopped wearing it. But the one thing that I did like about it, because I wore it for like 2 weeks, was it did show when I got more sleep, when I got more restful sleep, I was getting more of the ranges of the sleep, of the light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, all of that. And I did feel better when those numbered minutes were higher. So I think it was helpful for that. I don't know that I want to keep wearing it long term. And I also didn't wear it like all the time. I only wore it to sleep. I wasn't going to wear it all day long where it can track, all your biometrics. I just thought it was interesting. But it's a lot of money for something that's interesting. Long-term data, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth spending the $300 or whatever it is for that. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents on it. But I thought the book was fascinating. I think he's fascinating. And like with the breath book, which I also read but didn't do the book club, so many things relate to this. Mm-hmm. So many aspects of our lives, of our health, of our well-being, beyond just feeling good, the relationship to illness and autoimmune diseases and all of that stuff that I found fascinating. And I think it makes sense. And I'm glad that he's bringing this to more of a mass audience because it's written accessibly. It's not written like an academic paper. Right. It's understandable. So that's what I have to say about that.
Those are such great points, Dawn. Yeah. It's interesting. I questioned also I don't want to say the validity of the research, but for other health reasons, I've had a couple of MRIs in the recent year. And there was a lot of studies where they were hooking people up and putting them in MRIs to do these scans. And I thought, if you've ever had an MRI, how could that even remotely be like an experience, to sleep in an MRI, if you've ever had an MRI, to me, seems absolutely impossible. And so I questioned whether, it's not really a real life situation when you're attached with not, things on your head in an MRI, trying to sleep and dream and all of those things. So for me, the fact that they were doing that research in what doesn't seem to be a very realistic environment also, in my opinion, would skew the data. I'm friendly with the head of neuropsych here at Brown University, which is a Ivy League known university, and he actually said, "Oh, you're reading that book by Matthew Walker." He knew immediately, and he said, from a technical standpoint, was his word, that he is renowned, and a lot of the neuropsych community really love his presentations from a more technical standpoint. I did try to listen to the book on tape a little bit from Audible, and I found that challenging for me. Perhaps I'm just not the best auditory learner, but it was kind of like I would zone and the words were just there. I found it much easier for me to read this book as opposed to listen. And that's kind of what led to that discussion. So like Elisa said, from a publishing standpoint, I sense that he's really strong in his technical piece and professor presenting and those kind of things. And now he had to embellish into a book, and it's definitely a different place, I think, from a technical standpoint to a more layman's terms. And I don't know anything about wearables because I've never done it, but but it does seem like it's easy to be able to get almost anxious. I feel like there's a piece in the book where he said some people, when they track it, they get more anxious, and then it becomes more challenging for them to fall asleep, stay asleep, whatever, because they're so overconsumed by worrying about it. So
it was an interesting experience for me. I wore it all the time for about 3 months, the ring itself. And I thought going into it that I had terrible sleep because I was going through this little period of insomnia where I'd wake up in the middle of the night. But the ring actually, even on nights where I woke up, said that I slept really well. Not always. There were definitely nights where it was like, yeah, you didn't. And if I had I could see trends. If I had alcohol at all, my sleep was worse. If I if I didn't move around enough the day before, my sleep was worse. Like there were definitely trends and things that I learned from it, but my conclusion came from it that, gosh, I don't think I need this. I don't think my sleep is as bad as I thought it was. And that was one of the sort of claims against Matthew Walker in some of the podcasts I listened to, because I did do a little digging like, okay, well, who's saying this is like shoddy research? It's not his research that they're complaining about. It's studies that he cites in the book to back up claims like we're sleeping worse than ever. And, you know, the claims that some of the podcast hosts that were saying like, oh, this isn't very reliable, because he's using these broad correlation studies to sort of back a lot of those claims up. But I don't know. I don't really think, I mean, when you look at these kind of books with the point of view of like, this is an author who had to like create a reason for you to want to read this book. Like, we're sleeping terrible nowadays. And for sure, we are concerned about our sleep nowadays. We have too much technology, too much light. We don't sleep with the rhythm of the sunrise and sunset. But when it comes to sleeping terribly, we sleep in the most comfortable beds. This is one complaint that people made against him. We sleep in the most comfortable beds with usually only one other person, whereas, you know, 200 years ago, you slept in a bed with like 6 people and a lot of bugs. And like not comfortable and all these things. So like, really, they were pretty good. I thought that was funny. But in the end, my conclusion with the wearable was that I sleep fine. And wearing this thing isn't really like, oh, okay, I learned what I need to learn. I'm actually not that bad off. And I know what goes wrong if I'm doing something wrong. I have a question for you guys. Has anybody tried reducing your exposure to blue light at night, or like what is your response to light? Sunlight, if anybody's messed with that.
I definitely have been doing the dimming the lights in the house in that couple of hours before bedtime, trying not to be on my phone before bed. It's really hard because I feel like as a teacher, I need to check emails and texts the night before in case somebody's canceling or whatnot. But I am trying. And also I'm trying to, I really took away a lot from what he was saying about caffeine in particular, about the half-life of coffee. I always had an afternoon coffee or tea, feeling like I needed that to get me through the rest of the day. And I gave it up. It was hard, but I pretty much gave it up, and I don't have any caffeine afternoon. And I think that it helps me fall asleep better at night. I have noticed that. But it's hard to tell. I guess, you know, if I really wanted to keep a journal and see, is my sleep better now that I'm dimming the lights at night? And but I don't know. But I also feel like I did probably better, and it's not hurting me to do that. So I think it's easier for me to fall asleep at night. I was having trouble with that. I know he talks about like what is really insomnia and what isn't. And I was having trouble falling asleep. And that seems to be better.
Hi, I'm Onilaja. Onilaja, yeah. Oh, so I have not gotten into dimming the lights. I have a setting on my phone that's supposed to be better for sleep, but I just love watching TV in my bed. I'm sorry. And in fact, I have found recently that if I set the timer on the TV, I easily fall asleep to the TV show. And then the TV turns itself off. So that has been working for me. So I don't know about that research. I just want to say I'm so sorry. I actually haven't read the book, but it's a subject that I'm very interested in. I have heard about the book. I do want to read it because I want to understand about sleep. I use the Garmin watch every night, and then I also had the sleep cycle app on my phone. So I was using both of them and tracking them. And sometimes one says I had great sleep, the other one says I didn't. And trying to, I stopped using the sleep app and just using the Garmin to track the amount of hours that it's saying that I slept. It's not necessarily what I'm experiencing. So I'm wondering if I read the book, I might understand more because maybe I'm actually conscious of, say, what's on TV, but I'm actually asleep because it's saying I was asleep during those. There's things going on that maybe I don't understand. So I am looking forward to reading the book, and that's why I'm here. I wanted to know more about sleep, whatever people had to say about the book. I just wanted to know.
Great, thanks.
I'll say something that I noticed that too, Onilaja. There were several times where I know I was awake, and the next day I looked at the app and it said that I had been sleeping during the time that I knew I was awake. And I was like, okay, well, was I just holding still so much that it thought I was sleeping? I think it can't be perfect, those things. I don't think.
Yeah.
And I had a sleep test done by a doctor, but it was an at-home test. Mm-hmm. And, he said, you're sleeping fine. So I was like, great, because sometimes, in fact, the day I went to pick up the apparatus, I was so wiped out, because I hadn't slept well. Like, something's wrong. And my problem is, for long periods of time, I wake up, and I'm retired now, so I go to bed. I try to go to bed approximately the same time every day. I allow my body to wake up naturally. Mm-hmm. I'm still tired. Mm-hmm. Why? And I've had all kinds of blood tests. There's nothing wrong. So I'm still trying to find out why. And so I'm still dependent on coffee. Why am I drinking coffee? Because for so many years I drank, if I got 7 hours sleep, I drank 1 cup of coffee. If I got 5 hours sleep, I drank 2 or 3 cups of coffee. You know what I mean? It was like the less of one, just more of the other. That was the solution. I don't want to have to drink coffee. I should wake up refreshed.
Right. And so, I think he makes a big point about that in the book, addressing the whole caffeine thing, because I used to do that too. We get into this vicious cycle, and you're tired in the day, you drink more coffee, then your sleep is worse. And Walker has a whole section about that in the book that says we just need to stop doing that. I still have my 1 cup in the morning. Okay, it's a big cup, but it's 1. So I have to to myself. Yeah, a little bit. But then I really just try to stop. And it's hard at first. It's like giving up sugar if you're going to do that or whatever your thing is. But then, your body is miserable for a couple of days and then it gets over it. And I think that makes a big difference. That I can feel.
I have something to say about that because I went through a period of extreme insomnia when I was going through perimenopause. And I felt like caffeine was making me too hyper. And then I read a bunch of stuff about it. And no one really ever wants to say this about caffeine because honestly, we're all addicted to it. But this one thing that I found was like, basically, when you don't drink caffeine, here's your performance level. You drink your caffeine and you go up here for performance that day. If you drink caffeine regularly, your performance level, you're down here. And when you drink the caffeine, it only brings you up to this and you don't ever go above. It barely gets you there. And the more you need it, the more you barely get up to your, baseline.
I have experienced that.
Yeah. And so I gave up caffeine for like 5 years completely. Like I cold turkeyed for like 2 weeks. I was like a junkie. I mean, it was really bad for me. And it still is. If I even have just a tiny bit, I'll notice headaches and like pain, just so much drama in my body. But I am also a person who is very driven to get things done. So without the caffeine, I'm a lot just like, whatever. I'm a little more sleepy. I don't care as much about that, about getting things done. So when there are times that I want to get things done, I have a little caffeine. And then I pay the price. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that might help, well, here's the other thing about sleep that I've been experimenting with that seems to really help. And I don't remember if he talks about it in there, if I heard it on one of the podcasts, but exposing yourself to bright sunlight in the morning and then again at sunset in the late afternoon, because apparently that's how our circadian rhythms are calibrated. It's like the bright light in the morning tells you to wake up. And then the second, this many hours later, bright light in the evening tells you, oh, the sun's nearing the horizon. It's time to get ready for bed. And it's not so much like you were saying, Onaji, the TV and stuff, that I tried all of the blue blockers when I'm watching TV all in the evening. I lit only candles. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. It's really if I got enough bright light right after I woke up and right before bed.
Do you have to go outside?
Have
to go outside.
It's better.
Exposure.
If I go watch the sunset, I find like I sleep like a baby. Or if Jack and my husband and I, we just went backpacking. If I'm out in nature, like if you can't help but wake up, the sun comes up, it's shining on the tent. You can't help it. When the end of the day, you're exhausted, all you want to do is crawl in the tent. It's like the perfect scenario. Your body sees the sun go all the way through its phase. I'm not sure I have to be in the sun in the bright midday the whole time, but it really helps.
There was a section.
Oh,
no, I was just gonna say in the beginning where he talks about like the stages of sleep, from infancy onward, when he gets to as we're older, he makes a point to say a lot of times he said older people, when they go outside, definitely take the sunglasses off. They like to wear the if they need glasses, sometimes they have the glasses that tint. Don't do that. Have the glasses where you don't have glasses on. So you're getting full exposure to the sun. And then if you need to be outside in the sunlight towards the afternoon, you can put them back on. So it starts to progress towards that darkness. He didn't necessarily say bright light in the end of the day also, but definitely at the beginning of the day, he was big on not having anything that blocks your bright exposure to the sun. So
if you stand in a bright window, that's not enough?
I think
it sounded like it was okay.
Yeah,
but
I think
according to the book.
Right. I discovered this idea because I was looking for a solution. We had a trip last year where we went far into another time zone, more than 9 time zones away. And I was like, I'm going to be destroyed because I had gone once to India and I was like a zombie for weeks.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I looked up all this research, and that's where I discovered this light thing, because the person who was dealing with jet lag response, which is the sleep response too, right? They were like, the way to fix your circadian rhythm is to really specifically have bright light only at these certain times a day. And there's even like a app that you can use to calculate how far away you're going, how many time zones, when to get the exposure. And it's a little complicated, but I actually, for the time zone I was going to, it was pretty simple. It was like avoid bright light in the mornings, which would seem counterintuitive, but it was like basically when you go that far from your own time zone, you don't want to have bright light in the morning because your body will be like, oh, it's time for bed, because it'll have skipped all the zones. So I got to say that was amazing. I did not really have any problems with jet lag at all.
Wow.
So
cool.
That convinced me that the bright light, like what your body is looking for, is like, hi, it's morning. Hi, it's evening. I'm going to go to sleep now. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Vivian.
Hi.
Thank
Caitlin,
you.
did you want to say something? Caitlin?
Yeah, so I haven't read the book, but I keep hearing about it popping up, and I was taking a kind of a course on vegetarianism and online with these 2 guys in Ireland. And so they did a whole session talking about this book. And one of the things I just kind of grabbed my notes from it that hasn't come up, but I found interesting, is that they were saying it's better to keep the same routine 7 days a week. So if you go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6, for example, keep that 7 days a week rather than feeling like it's a better thing to get more sleep on your day off. So that was an interesting point that they made. And then I also loved, and I don't know if it's part of the book or if it's something that they had suggested, was to the hour before you go to sleep, they said spend the first 20 minutes preparing for tomorrow. So either, I mean, they're into food, so kind of preparing your food or your breakfast or your clothes. And then the second 20 minutes on hygiene. And then the third set of 20 minutes, you're dimming the lights, turning off whatever electronics and things like that. So that actually sounded like a very doable hour, whereas some suggestions are like, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
So, and that's not that dissimilar to what Matthew Walker was saying too, of like getting yourself ready to go to sleep. You know, this thing about the schedule, somebody else mentioned that too. That is so freaking hard because I have to get up really early for early clients. And some days are very long teaching days. And like in the winter, you know, you're getting up in the dark. There is no sun until I get to the studio and I'm going home in the dark. And I don't want to have to get up at 5:30 on the weekends if I don't have to. And I know that everybody says that's what you should do, but are other people I mean, I also have retired clients like Unileja was saying, it's like, oh, I can just get up naturally now, which is what Matthew Walker also has the luxury of doing and going to bed when I'm tired. And I'm sorry, at this point in my life does not accommodate that. So it's just so hard for me to force myself to get up early on the weekends when I know I don't really have to. Do other people struggle with that? I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it when I was
almost
working.
feel like, I kind of feel like his point to all that too, though, was that we can't, I remember significantly him saying, we can't sacrifice a lot of our sleep in the weeknights and then expect to bank it. Like it's not a bank account.
Right. I understand that.
You can't sacrifice and then bank it and make up for it in 3 days. It's not going to work that way. So I took that more to mean like the more similar you can stay within a range. Right. I mean, I know I wake up at 5:30 too, and like, on a weekday every day, but on a weekend, if I can make it till 7, that's like, that's luxury. So I feel like an extra hour and a half isn't like 5 hours and then 9, 5 and then 9, you know, it's similar enough within a span, but yeah, it's hard. There's no way I'm waking up at 5:30 on Saturday. I did think his
point about the fact that it's impossible to make up sleep. Cause I think I used to have this concept, as a lot of people do, that you can make it up. And one of his big takeaways in the book is like, no, you can't make it up. At all. It just is constant sleep deprivation. So don't think, oh, you can just sleep in on the weekends and now you're good.
Right.
You're not good.
You know, it doesn't work that way.
When I've read articles, I mean, I'm not remembering anything specific, but I feel like I have read over and over again when I read about like elite Olympic athletes or elite runners, they get a lot of sleep and take a lot of naps. I mean, maybe they do it on a regular routine, but I mean, maybe they aren't having to make up for a loss of sleep, but they certainly seems like take a heck of a lot of naps and get more hours of sleep than your average.
I'm really curious about what his stance is, because I don't remember seeing or hearing this on the whole changing the clocks that we do, because that 1 hour like messes us up, I think. So I didn't see that anywhere.
I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday, but you know how the Senate just passed a thing about like, oh, we're going to turn it off and we're just only going to have daylight savings. Well, NPR just had some little article, or somewhere I saw an article yesterday about how they tried this in the 70s. And for like 2 years, we did it. And everyone was so miserable. Like people complained so bitterly. They were like, no, it's worse. I know we said we wanted this, but we want to go back, turn it back, put it back. So I think the problem was, as much as we love having it light later, we hate getting up in the dark. And
Yes.
when we turned it back to the other way, when we didn't change the clocks, everyone was getting up in the pitch dark, going to work in the pitch dark, kids in school, everybody. And that was worse. And the end of the article, there was somebody who had kind of looked at all worlds, or someone who was an expert, I can't remember, but they basically said, like, honestly, guys, I know everyone hates changing the clock, but the way we have it now is probably the best way. And that if we were to change it, instead of going to daylight savings time, it would be better to change it to standard time and just have standard time.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, one of my clients, we talked about it. One of my clients mentioned, remember in the 70s, my kids were getting up and going to school in the dark. It was terrible. That's her, she was saying the same thing. I remember because I was born early 70s. So I do remember going to school in the dark, right? And and why they changed it. But
it was like pitch dark.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of. Yeah, it's hard. That's really hard. And you have kids that walk to school in the cities where I live. They walk to school. All you need is an accident to happen, and then this is going to be really bad. So yeah. It was an interesting point that I kind of wish she'd talked about, but I also realized certain countries change, certain countries don't. Exactly. Even in our own United States, there's a state that doesn't change, and it's one of those kind of volatile topics.
Yeah, and I think it depends on where your state is in the zone of, are you super far north? That's going to affect it a lot more. Are you super far south? Like Arizona doesn't change in their south, and they have a lot of sunlight, and people maybe don't notice as much there.
I think they need to make the school day start later.
That was his point too, specifically for, like, I always go back to my kids, adolescent, 13, and how middle school, high school, by the time they're like 15, they should not be starting school as early as they are. But I remember too, there have been movements to try to make it later, and it never happens because now it's not working with the parent work day. And so we're just no one is in sync with the way it's supposed to be, it seems. So, yeah.
So I have a couple of more things that I can talk about that I learned about in my process of dealing with my own insomnia, which were, I read a lot of things that were like, get rid of all light in your bedroom. And I did my best to do that. So I took all electronics out of the bedroom. I took the TV. I enjoy watching TV in bed too, but I took it out, and I only watch TV in the living room now. And I got blackout shades. And I do find that really helps. The dark, cavey bedroom was really nice. That was a nice change that I discovered. I do like waking up with the sunlight. So I don't know, short of getting some electronic thing that makes your shades open in the morning, that's not happening. But I sleep better in the dark. And then the other thing I noticed is that keeping the room colder really helped me. And that could have been a function of the fact that I was hot. I'm hotter now, but the cold really helps. Has anybody else experienced that or tried that?
Yes. I even keep a window open through the window. I mean, I'm in Chicago, so it gets really cold, but we always keep the window just even a little cracked open. And I find it's interesting. Yeah. I would find that I woke up more when I was hot than if I was cold. Like I hardly ever woke up because I was cold, but I would wake up during the night because it was too hot. So keeping the windows open really helped. Yeah.
I use a sleep mask. I have the blackout shades. I have a really hard bed, which is more comfortable for me. I do all those things. Yeah. It's just the TV. The TV's staying.
If you're falling asleep with it, then like, why worry about it?
Right.
I feel like a lot of the book was, like I said, these authors often have to blow up an idea that we already know instinctively, which is common sense, and it's like Pilates too. It was something that always cracked me up when we would be in an apprentice meeting with Romana, and we'd ask her like, well, what about this? And what about that? And she'd be like, just use your common sense, darlings. And we'd be like, no. Because like, honestly, when it comes down to it, it really is like, we're asking a lot of questions and working ourselves up into something that's really like, we know instinctively. What would you do for a baby to calm them down and help them sleep? Like you put them in a snuggly thing in a cool room in the dark, and then you'd like, talk to them quietly. Oh, there was something else I wanted to say about the, I'll think about it in a minute.
I do think one of the things that Matthew Walker puts at the end of the book is to kind of tell people to chill.
Yeah.
That he does give all these lists of things that can help you and try to do them if they help you. But he also said, don't make yourself anxious about this. Like, that's the last thing you want to do, is be so worried about this that then you're anxious about falling asleep and staying asleep and all of that. So I think maybe he doesn't say it enough throughout the book, but he definitely says it at the end. And it just made me think, it's the same attitude that we have about everything, like, don't obsess about your food too much, enjoy your life, do the best you can most of the time. And I think his point about sleep was the same. If you can do these things, the biggies that are going to help you, great, but it shouldn't make you worried more than you already are about things.
So here's the other thing that I thought of, which was that if anybody didn't get to read the breath book, or the author did come to our meeting, and the meeting is, the recording is on the site, and he's really interesting to listen to. So I encourage you to listen to that, or check him out on some other podcasts. But the thing that I tried from that book was taping my mouth, because he talked a lot about how breathing through your mouth is just detrimental overall to your whole system if you're doing it all the time. Like, of course, if you're running a sprint race or something, you're probably going to end up breathing through your mouth, and that's fine. But if you're just generally walking around, all of your air is coming in through your mouth, not so good. So I tried taping my mouth, and I sleep way better if I tape my mouth. Like, I
still do it?
Off and on, yes.
I was wondering if I could tolerate it. It seems like, I don't know. I
thought I would be weirded out by it, but honestly, I was not. And he talks about, you could just put one little square over the middle of your lip to sort of keep your mouth closed. And I've done that, and that's fine. But I love it when I tape my whole mouth.
Really?
I don't think I could do that.
It's so funny.
I've been tempted to try it. What kind of tape did you use? Did you use the stuff that he recommended?
It was like, I had something that was like paper tape. It's like 3M that comes off really easy.
Yeah.
And if you have anything moisturizing on your lips or face, don't do that. Have your face be dry when you put it on, because it'll stick and get all sticky to the moisturizing stuff.
Okay.
So just on a dry face, maybe stick it to your pillow once and then put it on, because it doesn't have to be very tight. It's just basically something that keeps your lips closed. And now I'm really sensitive. If we go, for example, to my mother-in-law's place, I find that she snores, and I'll hear her snoring, and I know she's breathing through her mouth. It's like, I can tell. And then the next day I'll know she's tired. She needs a lot of naps. I'm like, I wonder, I cannot get her to do it, but I'm so curious.
Yeah. Well, that was the interesting. Yeah. What interesting about Nestor's book was, he said, we're not supposed to snore at all. Mm-hmm. It's not a normal thing.
And I do have friends who have, I have a friend who had sleep apnea. He had all kinds of issues with snoring, and he started taping his mouth shut and could not believe the change in his biomarkers and his sleep quality. He cannot sleep without it now. It really changed his whole sleep pattern.
I wondered if that was a thing. I like that John asked Lisa if you still feel like you have to do it. It's not like you can behaviorally make yourself do it on its own. I think
I do a lot. I think it does regulate you and reteaches you to keep your mouth closed. And in Nestor's book, he talked about in many Indigenous cultures, at least all the ones that he talked about in the book, the Indigenous cultures are often believe in keeping your mouth shut and only breathing through your nose. And in fact, he mentioned some culture who doesn't even tend to smile a lot or talk a lot, because they're like, you're going to breathe through your mouth. So, and they'll pinch their baby's mouth shut. If the baby's sleeping with their mouth open, they'll just and then the baby will start sleeping with their mouth closed. It's like training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I find if I feel like I'm doing it again, like breathing through my mouth, or I feel like I'm not sleeping that well, I'll be like, okay, I'll put the tape on and see if that helps, and I'll sleep better. And then, I don't know, I feel calmer. That's the thing.
Where on the Pilates website? Where on the Pilates website would I see this?
On our book club page. So on the book club page, which you can get to if you log into the
link
website.
in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll put the link in the chat here and you can click it.
Okay.
Is it on the bar, the menu bar?
I feel like we need to put it
You
on
can
there.
search it.
You can
Yeah,
search
I
it,
usually
okay.
type in the search tab book club, and then
Okay.
it'll come up, and then just keep scrolling until
Right.
you come to the one you want.
Right.
Thank you.
I feel bad that I didn't really notice the book club stuff because I'm sure I was being informed and it just wasn't flying by.
I don't know. We get so many emails. It's like,
Right.
A lot of
I emailed
information
Elisa.
going
I'm like,
on.
oh, you guys should do the breath book. She said, yeah, we already did that.
I did it.
Navi just put it in the chat
perfect.
for you all.
Oh,
if you
yeah,
wanna
you can just
see
do
it.
that. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to listen to that. That was a fascinating book.
Yeah. I'm really excited we only have a few minutes left, but I'm really excited for Javier's book about Joseph Pilates. I mean, it was like a really tough book to read, but when you skip ahead and read through some of the parts that are, I don't know, just not about details of where someone lived and stuff, I found some really interesting stuff in there. I would love to ask him to bring some of his documents and things too. So we're going to look at that. And if you guys are looking at it and have anything that you would like us to ask for, let us know. I'm dying to put this book on our list, but I'm right now reading a fascinating book called Stolen Focus. It's about attention, about our focus, ability to focus, and whether or not we've messed up our ability to focus with technology and stuff like that. And it's amazing and super fascinating and kind of related to everything we're talking about with the breath book and this book about sleep. And he brings up sleep, but in so many different ways. It's really good. So that'll be coming up at some point too.
Great. I just started reading Javier's book, and it's really dense. I started now because I figured, okay, if I start now, maybe I'll be done by the time book club happens.
Feel free to skim.
And I was, it's really hard for me to skip. I'm just sure. I'm like, I might miss something important. But I did, I'm a very, very beginning, but just to share with others who might not have read it is, trolling through all of the genealogy stuff in the beginning, I thought, okay, Javier, do we really need to know all this? Mm-hmm. But then I realized at a certain point, he's starting to dispel this myth that Pilates was of Greek origin.
Yes.
And so you kind of have to slog through that to get to that very interesting point. Yes. So if you're like me and you're by nature have really trouble skipping around, there are some payoffs to that. But yeah, I kind of want to can we just jump to when Pilates was born?
Or could someone put a chart up and then just give us the
or just give us a genealogy chart. I don't know. Maybe there's one in the book and I just didn't look.
I don't know. But there were, I actually remember when I read through that and talked to some other people about it, there were quite a few myths that are dispelled in that book that I think you can come to some conclusions about things that Joseph Pilates said about himself. Right. And then when you read the book, it's like, oh, okay, some of this is true and some of it's just the stuff we make up about our lives, right.
Or maybe some of it he thought was true. I don't know. I haven't read enough of the book to know yet, but I think that'll be really interesting.
Really interesting. The fact that I think, did he talk about this in this book, or was it Kathy Barker Strack's book or Eva's book? The fact that the family his family was a large family and they lived in new homes that had just been painted. And therefore for however many years or months, there would be off-gassing happening. So they would rent it for really cheap. And then your family would move on when that place went up for...
That was Afa's book. I think she touched upon that. Yeah. Which is also in the Pilates book club, Pilatesology book club page.
Yeah.
Discussion with Afa Rinke. Yeah.
But it can explain a lot of things, right? And it can explain his stories about being a sickly child. Maybe he wasn't sickly, but he had a lot of brothers and sisters who were, or maybe you did cough a lot because you lived in a house that was off-gassing, turpentine the whole time.
Fumes.
It's fascinating stuff.
One of the things that I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about sunshine was how much Pilates talks about that in his book, in Return to Life, about getting outside and having your skin be exposed to the sun. And he talks about sleeping and, you know, inventing that bed of his because people didn't sleep well. You know, he was kind of revolutionary, well, in so many ways, but even about stuff like that. And, you know, the scrubbing and, you know, stimulating your skin to be healthier. And I was thinking about some of that as I was reading the sleep book too.
Yeah, there are several things. You know, we have a blog post about this, but there was a movement in Germany during that time that he was growing up called the Turnverein clubs, and they were like gymnastics clubs, but their beliefs are exactly what you're saying, Dawn. They believed in exposing their bodies to sunlight, and it's a very Austrian, Germany concept, is like being naked, sunlight, breathing fresh air, and even I've had Pilates elder people talk about like flushing your sinuses with water. And he talked about that, scrubbing your skin in the shower, or dry scrubbing before. That's a big thing in that. Body weight movements, although they did have weights in those clubs. Not super huge, but still they did use weights. Yeah, and Jay Grimes says that Joseph Pilates, or maybe it was John Steele, I forget who, was saying that every single day Joseph Pilates would put on his little gym slippers and his shorts and walk all the way around his city block in the rain, sunshine, snow. It was like, that was his thing. He went outside every morning, regardless of how cold or hot it was. And we've all seen pictures of him in the snow in his shorts. So I think that's a thing. It's also a thing with, has anybody studied the, see, I've gone down this road way too far, I guess, but Wim Hof, the Iceman guy, he's the guy who created the, like, put yourself in cold ice water for 2 minutes a day at least, or like take a cold shower at the end, or cold showers in general, because it's basically like, don't live at 72 degrees at all times. Your body never has any challenge, and therefore it doesn't get any stronger. And he has a whole breathing method that James Nestor talked about. He doesn't talk about it so much as Wim Hof, that he talks about the person who really came up with it. But that breathing method being really effective. I asked him at some point during that book club, like, hey, what have you found that was the most effective? And that was the thing that he named. It's this like breathing method where you inhale, exhale 40 times quite vigorously.
Breath of fire, yeah.
And then you hold your breath out.
I'm reading a book on the Finnish sauna, and it's similar. And you know, in they do the winter swim for 30 seconds, and then you go to the heat and cold. So,
right.
You know, there's all those Northern European and European concepts of more naturopathic ways of dealing with things that we just haven't embraced here.
Do you know if that was some of the origins of cryotherapy, which seems to be like
the Finnish sauna
popular thing? No, like the freezing cryotherapy places that are I mean, there's a bunch of them around me.
I think there's some studies on it that show that it brings down inflammation and that can help with inflammation. I haven't looked at how reliable those studies are.
Yeah.
I've done it a bunch of times, and it's colder than like the moon when you're in that thing. It doesn't actually feel that way, but it's colder than anything. Just put yourself in ice. But it feels great afterwards. Your body is just like, wow.
Yeah.
How long do the effects last? Like, I don't know, do you feel different afterwards? Does it? I'm curious how you measure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe your joint pain is reduced. Maybe like the effects of vigorous exercise that would normally make you really sore are reduced. I can't say that I've done it enough to say if it worked or not. I don't know.
It's not something around my area that's talked about or that I would know a lot about.
There are like 3 places close to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm in LA and it's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think in certain communities launch themselves.
Yeah. They're like, oh, everyone who wants to do this here.
The Northeast is a little slow to pick up on things sometimes.
Don't worry, it's coming.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to meet with us today on Sunday and enjoying the book. Again, when you do book club with us, you do not have to have read the book. So we're glad that you came and wanted to participate, and I really appreciate that.
Really enjoyed our nice little
hope to see
today with all of you.
Yes, thanks,
I appreciate
Elisa.
all your help.
So, May, Nabi, Elisa, do you know the exact date in May? I don't have it off the top of my head.
I think it's the
for our next
15th.
one.
Yeah, it's May
May
15th.
15th.
Mhm.
Okay, and so we've decided for us that Sunday, so it's noon Eastern time, 9 Pacific time. So calculate from there. Is a good standard, a set time to have book club. So it'll be the same time, just May 15th, about the Javier Perez Pond book. Okay. So
Thank you.
Awesome.
Sundays are great.
I know.
Oh, good.
I
Awesome.
think
Thank you
we'll be
everybody for
sending out the
coming.
chapters, right? We'll be sending out the chapters, Elisa,
Mhm.
the ones that.
Yes, I know,
Javier will
Lisa,
be
I am going to do that homework today. I was doing this one first, but I will get some info to you too.
Awesome, you guys.
Thank
Thank you
you,
all.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great
Thank you,
week.
everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.